He was short, super short. My grandfather Ryan was, I think he was 6 feet, actually. But my grandfather Rogers was 5 feet. My grandmother was about 5 feet. My mother was 4'9". They lived in a wonderful house on Capitol Avenue in Indianapolis. Big old house. It had huge tall ceilings. It was wonderful old house. It is no longer there. And I own the chair that was used as her crib when she was born. My mother weighed 2 pounds when she was born in 1914 or whatever it was. And they used the oven as an incubator for her because she was nothing. And then they carried her on a pillow because they were so afraid to touch her. So she was carried around on a pillow, and then that pillow was placed on the very chair that I have in my room. My father's name was Frank Frederick Ryan. I think he was a junior, actually, out of Frank Frederick Ryan Sr., whose mother abandoned him when he was born, and his father, Frank Sr., sisters, 5 of which he had 5 sisters and I think 2 brothers. My father was then raised by 5 women. He was hired as a timekeeper for Chevrolet and then went to night school trying to get some kind of education. But then apparently my sister and I were born, and then he worked more, and highly motivated, very mathematically oriented accountant. Very German in precision. He worked 9 to 5. You could set your watch by him. Came home, dinner, the kids were to be clean. You clean up for your father coming home. You get the table set, dinner is ready when he walks in the door. And no issues are to be presented until after dinner. No. Your father is tired. Your father. Father was always spoken of as father. He never became dad, ever. That's a term of familiarity, of which we had none. Well, he ended up as head of the accounting department for Chevrolet and hiring all the MBAs and all the other accountants that had college degrees. So he was kind of known as Little Hitler. He was very militaristic. He had high expectations of his staff. He ran a very tight ship. So he was promoted. Lighthearted, laughed a lot, liked to laugh. Very sociable. And a victim of her time. She washed on Monday, she ironed on Tuesday, she cleaned house on Friday, did her hair on Thursday, but 1 task per day, which just what she did forever. And so when I got to be grown up, and of course I did all of it on one day, and generally before 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, I am to this day dazzled with what she did with her life. Absolutely astonished. Neither one of us thought we looked like each other, but probably I do. The older I get, the more I look like her. Probably not like her in most ways, other than the fact that giggles. We giggle a lot. Love stupid sense of humor.
In 1943, young Jane Ryan makes her entrance into the world, but she doesn't stay in one place very long.
Born in Indiana, moved somewhere when I was an infant, before I turned 1. That was Indianapolis. Then moved to Flint, which was where some of these memories happened. Then, when I was 5-ish, moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Was there till I was 6, 7-ish maybe. And moved to California. Van Nuys. 3 years later, moved to Michigan. Moved 2 or 3 places in Michigan. Moved to Bloomfield Hills, 7th through graduation. Very much of a tomboy, loved climbing on the fence around the house and climbing in the apple trees, and I would have been doing that. If I could find a tree anywhere, I would be climbing trees with boys. Not a doll person. Like to negate the fact that girls couldn't do what boys could do. That was pretty much my modus operandi. Wasn't that I wanted to be a boy, I never wanted to be a boy. I did want to make a point. I don't think it was conscious, but I do recall the feeling of whatever you can do, I can do as well, if not better, but mostly it was equal. It wasn't trying to show any kind of superiority, to negate the negative that girls were put into pigeonholes. When I lived in Georgia, first grade, at the top of the street, this was during segregation, clearly, and there was a chain gang that would work at the top of the street, and they were chained together with chains and balls and chains and striped uniforms, and most of them were black, and most of them were guarded by white men with big rifles who were really nasty and ugly, and the prisoners were all very nice and friendly. I was a tow-headed, blue-eyed little person that came up and talked to them. And that was the beginning of my consciousness raising of these human beings being chained together, guarded by ugly white people. Never made sense to me. Drinking at separate fountains didn't make sense to me. That was the beginning of a lot of things in my head.
Jane's high school years were memorable and very, very busy.
Bloomfield Hills High School in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan was it was a new school when I went there. So I graduated in '61. You know, I was a short, blonde, petite, giggly, fun person. Inter-school basketball, inter-school field hockey, GAA, Girls Athletic Association, Latin Club, I was president. I was a cheerleader, of course. The yearbook, the newspaper staff, advertising manager, class representative, whatever that meant, did morning announcements. That was always fun. So you could put stuff in. Anyway, it was fun. So there was that, there was cheerleading practice, there was gymnastics, there was volleyball. There was nothing I wasn't involved. I don't think there were any clubs that I wasn't involved in. Not Homemakers of America, I can tell you. In high school, I just crazy dated. I was always dating somebody, one person in particular. Not necessarily going steady. But during the summer, in my house in Bloomfield Hills, I had a blackboard by the phone. My mother was my secretary. So the first thing that I did when I walked into the house was look at the blackboard and see all these guys that had called. It was hilarious. It was fascinating. we just had fun, you know. It was just going out and having fun, just laughing and driving around to Ted's drive-in hamburger joint and dancing. We did a lot of wonderful dancing. I just got a call one day from a guy, and he said, guess what, you've been selected by the football team to be on homecoming court. And it's like, I didn't even know we had a homecoming. How did that happen? It's like, oh my gosh, who knew? Living in Bloomfield Hills was, it was a very high rent district. I think it was the first or the second highest income community in the United States at that time. The Ford family lived there. It was where all of General Motors and all other Chrysler, Ford, everybody, all the execs lived. Christ Cranbrook was there. Romney went to school there. I dated guys that were probably friends of Mitt Romney, which is kind of worrisome. But, and then there was a girls' school, Kingswood. Kingsley? No, Kingswood. Kingswood. It's Cranbrook and Kingswood. Boys and girls school. Private schools, very, very pricey. Only people with gobs of money, which most people that lived in Bloomfield had gobs of money, lived in palatial estates. It was a national sorority that's in high schools, that was in high schools all over the country. I babysat for women who had my sorority pin in their possession, which was pretty fun. I belonged to TAE, Tau Alpha Epsilon. My father called it Talk and Eat Society. And there was the competing sorority, which was DAD, but TAE was clearly the better one. We got invitations to join these sororities, engraved invitations, like wedding invitations. And then there were 3 T's that we had to go to. And that's where you met all the members. It's just like Rush in college. But these T's were greeted with butlers and maids, white gloves, and you actually sat around with tea and crumpets and in these palatial places, and they had servants waiting on us, playing grown-up, I guess.
The highly rated University of Michigan Nursing School is no match for Jane Ryan.
College was intense. That's all I can think of. Intense. Fabulous reputation. High standards, difficult. Really hard. It's a Bachelor of Science degree. It's a 5.5-year course, smooshed into 4 years. Because you go to school year-round, summer school every year. With didactics, you're in the hospital. University Hospital is one of the biggest research hospitals that was. We did the first open heart surgeries. We did the first open heart on babies ever. We did the first of a bajillion things at Michigan. It was not easy, but that's where I met my future husband, my first semester, freshman year. It was a huge lecture class, so 500, I don't know, probably. In that section, I set the curve on the final exam. But I was dating my professor, so I had to be absolutely certain that there was no conflict of interest when he graded. I had to be better than everybody else. I had to be. I had an English minor, I wrote poetry, I wrote short stories. I loved that. Couldn't make a living, so just minor in it and just do a lot of it. And wrote tons of poetry. I was doing a rotation in Children's Psychiatric Unit when John Kennedy was shot. I was overseas when Robert Kennedy was shot. Cuba issue was going on in 61, wasn't it? Wasn't it 61 or 62? Yeah. I think it was in the fall because I remember sitting in the common room in the dorm. Mary Markley was the name of the dormitory that I lived in as a freshman. Big changes in 64, 65. That was Tonkin, Gulf of Tonkin. It was all of that stuff. I have very clear memories of that. Johnson and Goldwater, all of that. A lot of stuff, a lot of social politics going on. Had I not been in Michigan, I would have been down south in the sit-in, no doubt in my mind. Yeah, a lot of stuff like that. We argued a lot. He is an intellectual snob, but that was very appealing to me. His intellectual was very appealing. His knowledge of classical music was very appealing. I took a lot of those classes as well to educate myself on things that I'd really not been exposed to. No one in my family had ever graduated, and my father was quite proud, pleased, excited, and I gave him my tassel that struck his heart. And then I got married 2 weeks after that. So that was it. I was planning a wedding, graduating, taking final exams, doing everything all at once, which is my modus generally. Graduated May 1st, got married May 15th, started work June 1st at Neuropsychiatric Institute as a psych nurse.
Newly graduated and newly married, Jane and her husband, Ron Monteperto, soon left for a Pacific adventure.
He got a grant. He got an NDFL grant to do research as a China specialist, a political scientist, China specialist. And so we were living on a grant, and we flew to Taiwan, stayed there for a couple of years. I was 22 years old. He was 24, 25. I was a medical secretary. I was a secretary for 3 docs at Namru 2, Navy Medical Unit Number 2, otherwise known as 美国海军医学研究所. Just saying. And then they sent me to the Philippines to do a medical research project on cholera, which I went. David Drutz and I and an entire airplane of Navy corpsmen with a few Chinese female technicians, lab techs, flew down to Manila for a month, a little over a month. And that was during their elections. And this is when people were being shot in a restaurant all the time. Yeah, people were killed in the very restaurants we were at, like the next night. Yeah, it was a kind of dangerous spot, but not for us. We were white people, so they didn't care too much about us. I mean, we were poor. We were poor graduate students. So I worked for a Baptist hospital, which was actually next door to our apartment complex. Ron went over to the International, I forget what it was called. It's where all the academics hung out, because he was doing research on the Red Guards. He was doing research on Red Guards coming out of Red China, escaping. And so, I mean, he wrote a book and did a dissertation, did all that stuff. Then I got pregnant. Then I had a threatened abortion. Then I was put into the hospital in Hong Kong. Was there for 6 weeks. Did not abort, clearly. David was born. Those were miniskirt days. So I had miniskirts that were there. So when I flew into New York with my miniskirt maternity at 8 months pregnant, my mother-in-law just about had a stroke. It was short. Hey, okay. how old was I? 28 years old. Tons of fun. I mean, lots of travel, lots of experiences, lots of family time. It was all family time. The boys went with us everywhere. We did nothing but trains. The kids were in a Japanese school where they spoke no English, so they learned Japanese. We made some good friends with Chinese-Japanese couples where we could actually communicate in Chinese with them. They would communicate in Japanese with their children and our children and translate into Chinese so we could get into those. Oh, too fun. Lots of fun. A lot of bike trips, big, long hiking and biking trips. That's what Japanese do. Went to all the castles, went a million places. Shinkansen went as many places. Went to the deer park in Nara, went all kinds of places. Buddhist shrines until I'm done with Buddha. I mean, you know, they were everywhere.
After Asia, Jane settles in, and starts a new life.
When we moved to Bloomington, I then started working for Planned Parenthood, working for the IU Student Union. I had 3 different jobs, part-time, all part-time stuff. And then I did the student clinic at IU for Planned Parenthood as well. Family planning teaching. And then I was asked, Roe v. Wade came up while I was at Planned Parenthood. And they said, you know, Bloomington Hospital, nobody wants to do these elective abortions. And I said, really? That's unfortunate. The need is clearly there. They said, well, would you like to go there and do those? And I said, of course. So it was in the course of counseling, teaching, and assisting on elective abortions that I was then asked to be assistant supervisor. And I love surgery. I mean, it's like, duh, of course I would. I'm OCD. I'm a neat freak. You know, it's very precise. It's very, you know exactly how to do it, and it's fast, and it's intentional, and it's, yeah, I love being in surgery. It was really fun. Then I became director of surgery. It's relational. It's relational. It's taking care of your nurses so that they can take care of patients. That's my job. So it's counselor, troubleshooter, conflict manager, that kind of stuff. It's all relational stuff. And that's what I did for 100 years. The boys, of course, that was the fun time when they're little. Whenever I think of those years, I think of the boys, and those were good years. Oh, do what you do when you're raising kids. Just being around them, making Halloween costumes with them, going on trick-or-treating, getting them signed up for piano lessons or violin lessons or swimming lessons. Oh my gosh, yeah. Running home in the snow to get David picked up to get him to the pool. And then sometimes the boys would go and they would walk over to the hospital together, meet me for lunch, that was awesome. That was too fun. Yeah, I mean, it's raising kids. And we were sailing, you know, we bought a sailboat and we'd go out to the club, and family stuff is really good, as my parents have said for 100 years. Ron and I were a wonderful family. We sucked as a couple. As a family, it was wonderful.
Following the end of her marriage, Jane and her boys join up with the Baker family and blend well.
How can any child be fine with divorce? They're just not. But they live through it and they adjust through it, and they transitioned very well into a new life with a new stepfather and 2 step brother and sister. And that was helpful. Oh, we took family vacations, often just weekends, where we did everything with all 4 kids. And they could do anything they wanted. You know, they could eat anything they wanted. They could eat as much as whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted it. We took them, taught them water skiing. Justin went on, what are those ATV thingies? There was a park thing. We played tennis. We went swimming. Oh my God, there was nothing we couldn't fit into a weekend. We took them on a train ride to Chicago. We did things locally on short weekends, but they were packed with new and fun things and exposing them to different things. But as a blended family, we're great. The oldest one and the youngest one got together fine, and the 2 middle kids, Shannon and Mark, and they're still close. Yeah, they still are in communication all the time. Mike was really tired of fighting the ice and snow because he was on the road a lot. So he looked for a job here. He was recruited by a company here. And so we came out and he visited and he said, oh yeah, I really want to do that. And looked at land and opportunities and possibilities, and he took the job, and while he was out here starting the job, I was back. I sold the 2 horses, I sold the land, and I sold our house. And then I came out here with the 2 boys. Did a road trip, had a great time with the 2 kids.
As the former director of surgery of a major hospital, Jane thought she was ready for Scottsdale Healthcare Osborne.
Clinical director of surgical services, which entailed the operating room, same-day surgery, special procedures room, and of course the OR, which was, I forget now, I think it was 12 operating rooms, where we did heads and hearts. And, you know, it was a 300-bed, 350-bed hospital, which was equivalent to where I came from. So I thought this was going to be no big deal. I was wrong, because it was a level 1 trauma hospital. I'd not worked with a level 1 trauma before. And that meant I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this was before the age of cell phones, but it was just in the age of answering machines. So I scheduled, because I had all these people. I had 150 people that were directly reporting to me, which is insane. And if we had 2 traumas or 3 traumas or 4 traumas, which often happened, then I was awakened in the middle of the night whenever they came. When the helicopters went over, my stomach hurt, because I had to staff this frickin' hospital. So that meant I had a list of my employees, and I went down the list and I would call them. Can you go in and do a trauma, whatever? Well, they got really smart, and they would not answer the phone. It would be on answering machine. There was 1 or 2 times when this happened on a weekend, and I had nobody. So guess what? I went in my running gear and ran the desk or did whatever I had to do. It was horrible. It was awful.
After a maddening year at a level 1 trauma center, a change is put into motion.
I wrote a resignation letter a year after I was there, and said I would stay for 3 months until they could get another person. And after I handed in the letter, that's when I got a call from the director of nursing, and she asked me if I would give a tour to the new CEO of Mayo Clinic, Scottsdale, the head of cardiovascular surgery of Mayo Clinic. I think it was just the 2 of them, actually. If I would give them a tour, because Mayo Clinic was opening And then when the surgeon came back after touring, he had to change his clothes. And while he was changing his clothes, I was standing in the hall talking to the CEO. And I said, ask me anything you want about this hospital because I'm out of here. And I had probably not very many good things to say. He did not ask me, and I did not volunteer. I just said, I'm leaving. He said, where are you going? I said, I don't know, but it's not going to be in healthcare in this valley. Really? Yes. Well, have you ever considered Mayo Clinic? I said, no. I said, I don't know what Mayo Clinic does. I don't know anything about you. And he gave me his card and he said, well, should you change your mind, give me a call because we may have a job that's not as big as this one, but probably at least as important as this one. And I said, okay, I might do that. So a couple weeks later, I called him because I was out of a job. I had no work. So I'm lying in my pool and I call the CEO. And I said, so tell me about this job. And they did, and they said, well, we'd like to bring you up to Minnesota and interview with medical staff, the whole medical staff of Mayo Clinic Rochester, and the medical staff that is going to be coming down to Scottsdale. I said, okie dokie. So they called it the nursing/technical supervisor, which meant that I was to hire all the nurses, all the technicians for the whole clinic, order all of the equipment and supplies for all departments at Mayo Clinic.
It wasn't open yet. So she was hiring the nursing technical group, which consisted of, I think there were about 17 of us, nurses and technicians, who would be the startup crew for the clinic when it opened on June 29th, 1987. And so she hand-selected, and she had, from what I understand, many, many applications. Everyone in the Valley wanted to go work at Mayo Clinic.
My father is an alumni of Mayo Clinic from Rochester, Minnesota. And he told me that Mayo was opening up a new satellite. So I went to interview and had met with the cardiologist first, who had thought there might be a place for me, and so introduced me via an interview with Jane. And that's how I got to first meet her.
I did manage by walking around every day, predictably. We were always seen. Ann and I were always seen every day in all the departments. So no one was ever slighted. And it wasn't in terms of critiquing, it was in terms of being supportive. How are things? What are your problems? How's it going? Both personal and professional.
I think Jane was a good match for them. I think that she's a very strong person. I think that she's not afraid to say what needs to be said, where sometimes people can be a little bit more quiet or play it a little bit more. I think Jane can be able to confront, not in a negative aspect, but in a way that everybody would listen and think, you know, what is the best way to do this, you know, and really thinking about the patient.
Jane's a wonderful supervisor. She truly knows how to guide people in directions that they don't even really know they're supposed to go in.
I hire people who are extremely competent and I trust them. I explain what their job is. And if they ask me, well, what are we supposed to do here? Then it always goes back, well, what do you think? Well, I don't know. Well, figure it out. I hired you to do this. And they did. We had an amazing retention rate, because the people I hired were all outstanding nurses who had a huge, wonderful track record. They were very bright, they were very independent, And quality folks. I was told at some point when I got into an argument with one of the surgeons, "You've just hired overqualified nurses." I said, "Is there such a thing, really, to run a medical facility? How can..." Oh, he was not my favorite person. He's gone. I stayed.
If you were to ask Jane about the consistent themes and passions throughout her life, her first answer might very well be animals, especially horses.
I loved horses from the day I was born. I have that picture of me on that pony. That was the first time I'd ever been on a four-legged pony. And what was I, 6? 5 or 6 in that picture? And it was just always a love affair. So, you know, I would save, I got 50 cents a week allowance. I would save my allowance for 3 weeks in a row because it cost $1.50 to go out to a riding stable to ride for an hour. And my mother would do that. They would not pay, but I did. And so, you know, I would just go out and ride, and I was fearless. I'm a child, you know, kids are fearless. We lived, when I was able to do that, I remember I was in the 4th grade, and we lived on an 80-acre farm outside of Flint. Went to school in Swartz Creek, Michigan. And it was an old, couple 100-year-old farmhouse, beautiful farmhouse, big, huge, white, with green shutters that had horses' heads carved out of them, on a lane of apple blossoms, with a white fence going back to the back, with this enormous barn. I think there was enough stalls, huge wooden stalls, beautiful, for 30 horses. Yeah, it was a horse barn. It also had an apartment in the back of there, and we rented the house. My dad worked for Chevrolet in Flint at that time. Rented it to a lady who had 2 horses. One was the great-granddaughter of Man o' War, a bay, mare, and then she had a big old chestnut, male gelding. Anyway, so the lady in the barn said, "You know, there's a horse show. Would Janie like to ride my horse in the horse show?" Can you even imagine? When they came to me and asked me this, I burst into tears. I couldn't believe it. They went out and they actually got me a real Western shirt and pants and boots and a hat and everything to ride in a horsemanship class. That was in Flint. That was wonderful. On my birthday, 16th birthday, my dad said, "Here is $400. If you can find a horse, a saddle, a bridle, everything, this is happy birthday." Well, I dissolved hysterically in tears. I had been wanting a horse since I was born, so it took me 16 years, and looked through the newspaper and found this horse. The lady was being sued for a traffic accident in, what's the big city? In Detroit. And so I asked a friend of mine whose dad was the premier dressage trainer in America to go with me and pick up this horse, because he had a horse trailer, and to do a vet check. First time I ever saw the horse, it had a Periani jumping saddle, had a bridle, had blankets, had brushes, had everything, had lead ropes. There was nothing that I didn't get for $400. Boom. Rode that horse around in a circle once, and he said, "It's good to go," and I'm good to go, and we went home with him. I named him, I don't remember what the name was, but I named him Gay Blade. I don't know why, I just did. So I called him Blade. I had to sell him when I went to school. It was just a year, because I was going to school. Can't ride him to Ann Arbor from Bloomfield Hills, it ain't gonna work. Anyway, so I sold him for double plus 50 in a year. I had sold the 2 Arabians in Indiana with the land and all of that stuff. sold all of the equipment here, looked around, went to the Arabian Horse Show once or twice, and realized that I really did not want anything to do with Arabs, that I really wanted a hunter jumper. And so I bought a hunter jumper horse, beautiful horse, Sandy. Jumped and trained with him for, I don't know, a couple of years, I guess. And then was going over a jump. I tended to be rather fearless about things and would go over whatever was put in my path, basically, which was pretty fun. Until one day I went over a fairly decent jump and he went up and the top of his head hit right below my nose. Realizing, of course, that could have, 1, broken my nose, 2, taken a tooth away, and 3, it hurt a lot. A lot. And from then on, then I started worrying about jumping, that I would fall off. And once you start worrying when you're not on the horse, it's time to stop. It's like when I was in the 4th grade and was playing with boys until I got tackled, full tackle, and I got hurt. I said, I don't want to play football anymore with the boys. Well, it's the same thing with jumping. I don't want to jump anymore. I bought Misha, my last dressage horse, and he was what was called very expressive. And he was young, he was a baby, he was 6, I think, coming 7 when I bought him. And he was just green broke, which meant you walk, trot, canter, that was about it. But it was a fabulous, fabulous dressage horse. So I trained him. I had a trainer, but I rode him and trained him. My trainer did not ride him. Many trainers ride the horse and then hand it over to the owner. I did not do that. I thought, why would I buy a horse for a trainer? I bought the horse for me. So it's just competition with yourself and with your ability to be a partner with another very large animal who could do you great harm. Many people would not ride my horse because he was expressive and he had huge gaits, but it was fun. It was wonderful. People used to line up at the horse shows just to watch Misha and me, just to watch the partnership in the warm-up arena, which is very cool. It's very cool. Anyway, took him from nothing through training level, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, ultimately to Grand Prix level. And we won and got a silver and then a bronze first, and then a silver medal, and we were 1 score short of getting a gold medal in dressage for all the training. Then he became lame, and I gave him away, basically. I free-leased him to somebody in Tucson. So that's the story. Very sad story. He was a fabulous horse. So as I was with my horse every day for years, my first chapel was at the foot of my horse's stall, because the stall would be cleaned, I would tack my horse up, do a massage on him. He loved to have massages. He would stretch out, almost fall over, and work him, bring him back, hose him down, re-clean the stall, because the stall cleaners, of course, did not clean it to my standards, of course. Gave him a bath, did his feet, gave him his carrots and his food, and then I would sit underneath his feeder while everything was cool and we were all nice and wet, and it was wonderful in Arizona because it's hot, so it was awesome. And that was my piece of the chapel. And that's where I met Katie Adelman, was in that barn.
Well, my relationship with Jane Baker started in a barn with horses. And my horse, Norman, the least performing horse in the barn was stalled next to Jane's horse, which was the greatest performing horse in the barn.
Oh my gosh, she's a total animal love person. Oh yeah, with Misha, she would sit in his stall on the floor. I don't know if it was probably after she rode, and just feed him pieces of hay. Just to have time with him. And she had this way of scratching him. It was a real light touch. And he'd go into La La Land. Just, oh my gosh, it was fun to watch. He'd stretch out and it was a really light touch. But she knew how to communicate with him that way and just got along famously with him. Because he wasn't an easy horse. But she was wonderful with him.
And in the barn, Jane kind of ruled. She knew a lot about riding, about horse care, about vet care, about feeding. So we all looked to Jane for an answer or two about what was going on with our own horses.
My horse became lame. I got a divorce. I moved. I retired. What else? All kinds of stuff happened, and I did not have, well, he was lame, so he could no longer compete. And so he needed to give his knowledge to someone. So I free-leased him, which meant he was given to someone to take care of him for the rest of his life. And then Kate Adelman's husband, Parker, when I had my 60th birthday, I had just free-leased Misha, and I could not get his stall plate off of his stall when I free-leased him and he went away. And that had his name on it. And Parker went to the barn, and because he's a handy-dandy handyman, he got the stall plate off and then made like a desk nameplate and presented it to me at their house that birthday celebration, at which point, of course, I broke down and sobbed, shockingly. I was shocked that I cried. I rarely cry, just for the audience. It's hard for me to cry.
The milestone of achieving age 60 was a time of reflection and consideration.
I was searching to what to do with the rest of my life. At 60, I figured I would live to at least another 40 or 50 years. So I was searching as to what to do with my life, basically. So I sampled many, many, many things. I volunteered at Liberty Wildlife. I was a mentor at Florence Crittenton. I went to Sojourner Center, which is for domestic violence, and wanted to volunteer, but got very involved with them. What else did I do? Oh, I worked for Alert. I had my own client on Arizona League to Prevent Regional Trafficking. Anyway, I was sampling a whole lot of things. And I had, in the horse show world, I had been introduced to Katie and Parker, and she worked at the church. And I asked her one day, it was actually Mother's Day, which was her birthday weekend, and we were at a show in Tucson. And I said, Katie, I want what you and Parker have. She said, well, I do a Bible study once a week. If you'd like to come, you're welcome to come. And I said, can I come smelling like a horse? Because I was still riding right then. And she said, absolutely. And I said, okay, fine. So I went to Bible study at Ascension. So because I had done a lot of traveling, then the pastor that was there and Katie asked me if I wanted to go to the Navajo reservation for the weekend and help paint and do whatever. And I said, oh, sure, that sounds like a capital idea. I mean, I'm a kind of cross-cultural person. So I did that one weekend. I think I may have done it twice. One morning I decided I just woke up. It was Sunday, and I just after having not entered a church in many months, years, I decided to go to church, and it was Easter Sunday. So on Easter Sunday, exactly however many years ago that was, I entered Ascension. Ryan and I then proceeded to have almost weekly meetings, and one of those meetings was a lunch date at a restaurant close by, and I think it was 11 o'clock lunch date, and we left somewhere around 8 o'clock at night. In that discussion, I was telling him basically my life story, sort of, and how I was searching for what I was supposed to be when I grew up, what I wanted to do, how I could more be of more use to the world. And he said, well, tomorrow I'm going to go to wherever he was going to go and meet with a diaconal minister. And I said, what the heck is that? Because I knew nothing about the church. And he explained what it was, and that's when I said, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I'm supposed to be, right there. So after I met with her and we had a couple more discussions, not very many, I said, what is the next step? He said, well, fill out an application, write a personal biography, autobiography, and make application and go to seminary. And I did. I just took it a step at a time, one foot in front of the other, and all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, I was in seminary.
After years of study at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary in Berkeley, California, Deacon Mary Jane Baker.
Doing just service. It's the lost, the least, and the little. It's out of the church. It's what this cross stands for. I'm with the congregation, taking them out into the world and getting people fired up for ministry out in the world. Sunday's fine, but worship and Christianity is way more than Sunday morning. And I'm the more than Sunday morning.
She nurtures that spirit within each one of us, and for every person it's different. It's a different direction that we need to go in, and this is what she does. She supports it and nourishes it and brings it to fruition and helps us implement it sometimes, whatever it is. And this is how her work is accomplished through us. She does much of that herself, but she also brings it out in everyone around her.
For Jane, someone who has made that transition from a very successful professional life into what is becoming a very successful retirement career, to have someone who is walking that journey and inviting anyone she can to join in that same kind of discernment and walk it's just a perfect match. It's hand in glove, because it's not a preacher preaching the word that you need to hear. It's someone who's walking the same walk that you are considering walking, and it makes a big difference.
Since I've been called by Ascension, I think there's 9 new ministries that were not in existence before. There were no ministries in existence when I graduated. So I've been appointed as the coordinator by the bishop for anti-sex trafficking for the Grand Canyon Synod, which means that I have access and authority to all of the 90 some odd Lutheran churches in the entire state of Arizona. And I am called to speak and teach and do all kinds of classes about anti-sex trafficking. I am on the Mayor's Council, that is the task force that is trying to change the sex trafficking of domestic minors in this country. And I was just interviewed on the radio, 2 radio stations, 2 weeks, last week. Anyway, We've started the Pocket Pal Ministry, which is making quilts with big pockets for foster children. We started the Coupon Clippers, which is clipping coupons for food bank in order to buy food. Actually, we're not buying food, we're given food for nothing to provide for the food bank. We've just started Take One, Give One ministry, is giving food and dog food, actually, packets to the homeless that are on the street. And it's just a little snack packet of healthy food and something to drink and something for their dog if they happen to have a dog, which is great. We started the Fair Trade Coffee. We do pancake breakfast at Grace for the homeless once a month. We've done Family Promise, which is providing overnight safe food and overnight sleep for homeless families with kids. So they have a place to sleep and not in their car for those people that have no job and no money. And it provides job training. Gosh, I can't remember all of them. There's so many.
She's great for this church. Not just for this congregation. She's great for this synod. She is great for our denomination. And some of the stuff she's working on, she's even great for world Christianity. You know, one of her little projects that she's working on is gathering a group of interested folks from our Lutheran church, our national Lutheran church, to work with the city of Rome to have a statue commemorating the 500th anniversary of the Reformation placed in the new Martin Luther Plaza or Square in Rome. You know, she's a part of that. She's a mover and shaker for that. So it's not just our little congregation, but it's even to home to Rome that she is serving and adventuring and witnessing.
I see her as, well, as a deacon, her main focus is social ministry and outreach ministry to the least, the lonely, the little, people that are vulnerable, the people that I believe the Christian family was created to nurture to. Our brothers and sisters that don't have what we have, we're here to share that with them, our blessings with them, and to be a blessing to them. And this is what she does. In 2014, Jane introduces Arizona to homeless Jesus.
It's a bronze of a man on a park bench, a life-size park bench, life-size man covered in a blanket. No face can you see, but it happens to be Jesus. And the only way you know that is you look, his feet are showing and he has holes in his feet. So it's a big bronze sculpture. I somehow got a hold of it for one of my sermons, and I projected it because it worked for my sermon. And as I got home that evening, after preaching about reaching out to the lost, the least, and the little, I went to my computer and happened just to email the sculptor, who's Canadian, and ask him how much the sculpture was. He emailed me back the next morning. I had an answer, and within 2 weeks I had 2 more donors. So we bought it. Took 9 months to create. We had the opening on November 23rd, 2014. We have an exclusive, so it's the only main sculpture in Phoenix. It can be in Phoenix ever. And it is going all around the world in all the major cities. So it's very cool. It's very cool. It's on Facebook. All the social media is picking that up all the time.
One of the many beloved animals in Jane's long, rich life is a dog. A very small, very white Maltese.
I have a very small, very small, very white dog here, and her name is Snow. Just a little bit up. This is Snow, and this is a little dog that went with me to seminary. What? That's Snow, and she lives with me, and she is a local church dog, and she loves babies and little kids and people in general and cats. She loves kitties and really does not like dogs. So she is an alpha, and she gets really mad when she sees another dog because they've not asked her permission to exist. So she like screams at them. No, I mean, they can be huge dogs. She doesn't care. But she, you know, I must have a dog. I must have a dog and a cat. I must have animals in my life. There is no question.
Another lifelong passion of Jane Baker is travel.
After I retired and I was single, went to Africa, Tanzania, the Tanzanian girls' school where we taught for a couple weeks. And then my travel companion, Cheryl from Seattle, who's a friend of Katie's, and I went up to Kenya, down to South Africa, traveled backpacked South Africa for 4 weeks with no reservations. What a fabulously good time we had. It was amazingly good time. So we were gone 6 weeks. Went from one end of South Africa to the other, to Cape Town to Zululand, then left back up to, Netherlands, went to Netherlands. I spent a week in the Netherlands before we left for Africa. And then 2 years later, we went to China, back to China. I never was on the mainland before. This time I was on the mainland because it was open. The Nanking, Shanghai, and then Beijing, which was so fun because Cheryl couldn't speak any Chinese and I could, and so we were talking with pedicab drivers, and it was lots of fun. Then we went home. Then 2 years after that, we went to South America. We went to Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, and that's where we stayed at a 2,000-acre ranch, herded cattle and castrated cows, and vaccinated sheep, all on horseback, and stayed in a ranch house, had no heat, had a huge fireplace. We had to collect wood off of the land because it was very cold. It was in our summer and their winter. And then last year went to Rome and Poland, Auschwitz and Birkenau, back to Rome and home.
When someone asks, who is Jane Baker? The correct answer is complex, yet crystal clear.
I get bored with sameness. Sameness is a killer for me. Then you just go to sleep and you don't learn. And I'm all about learning and connecting with other people, especially the lost, the least, and the little, interestingly enough. Who knew?
She's never idle. If she's sitting, her brain is going. I mean, oh my gosh, the things that she's become involved in, what she did her whole life is just phenomenal.
Jane Baker is this vivacious, smart, honest, energetic woman who is doing a fabulous job in her new later in life career, and who has done many, many different things. And now at this point in her life, she is, she's really dedicating her life to serving people and humanity, and what a gift. I mean, it's a wonderful thing that she's doing, and she's so happy.
I love her. She'll be my friend forever. I feel very comfortable with her. I know I can call her up for anything, you know, even if we might not talk for a while, and just carry on conversation. And I love her, and I love that she keeps going. In her retirement, she never retired. She just found more ways to do things and more things to do.
Very intelligent, very creative, incredible multitasker, knowledgeable about many, many things, personable, generous, kind, inspiring.
Jane is tender. I don't think Jane shows that very often, but she's tender. You can touch her pretty easily.
She's a relaxing, calming kind of person. You just feel relaxed around her. You want to talk to her about anything. She'd probably talk to you about a bug or the sky. It doesn't matter. She'd be there, joining in. Not judgmental at all. Just fun, very fun.
Jane Baker is a daughter of the Most High God. She is a servant who looks a lot like Jesus. She is a friend who will both listen and will speak the truth in a way that you can hear it. She is an adventurer and always looking for what's next. That's Jane.
Now in her mid-70s, Jane Baker has learned and taught a lot about life.
I think the focus has to change from being happy to making someone happy. A whole different orientation. It's not about us doing something to make us happy. It's about us doing something to make someone else happy. Happy, safe, whole, complete. And doing whatever we can do to assist in that process. Fighting the good fight, if you will. Primarily justice things. We are responsible for each other in community. And that's enough. That's enough to do something for others. Period. It's easy. But timing is everything, and ages and stages occur. And when you're little, you're concerned with things that children should be concerned with. I hope for you safety, always. I hope for you health, always. Barring that, then your focus will be to become safe and to become healthy and to become whole. Assuming that you already are safe, healthy, and whole, then your job is, as we are all sent, to reach out for the lost, the least, and the little. And it's in that you will become, you will find life. I don't know that you will find happiness, because I don't think happy is what we're all about. You will find joy beyond measure. Happy, I don't know about that. I mean, happy is fleeting. Happy happens. You know, this makes me happy, this moment, this instant. But joy is deeper, richer, and forever. So that's to me is what life is. Life is becoming enlivened. However, as you're small, you've got ages and stages, you go through school, valuing the other person, no matter who that other person is. I read something not long ago, it was very cute. If you think of people as trees, when you go into a forest, you see pine trees, and you see oak trees, and you see skinny trees, and you see fat trees, and you see short trees, and you see tall trees. And you see trees that look a little bit under the weather, and others that are flourishing with flowers on them, that are beautiful, and some not so pretty. And if you think of people like that, because as we walk through the forest, we simply accept what is, and we appreciate what is. And I would say if we appreciate what is, you're far ahead of the game. So you get into young adulthood, you go to college, assuming that's what you want to do. Depending on what you want to do for a living, you may want to go to school, may want to go to college. You may want to go to postgraduate, whatever, doesn't matter. That's a stage and an age, and then you may or may not wish to get married. You may or not wish, who knows? You may not ever want to have kids, and that'd be perfectly fine too. Whatever, I just say go with your heart. But there will come a time when you no longer are scratching to make a living and to feed yourself. There will be a time when you will say, I have enough. Now it's time for me to give back. And that's what you do. That's the rest of your life. That's just it. But that's, no matter what your limitations are, there's always a way. There's always a way to reach out to somebody else who may not have less, but may need your help at that moment. And that support and that respect as a human being for whoever they are, whoever you are. And I also wish for you acceptance of who you are. I have no idea who you are. I have no idea any of who you are, but my wish is that you will find joy in who you are and whose you are. Because for sure there is a whose, and that is your Creator, whoever that is to you and for you. Whatever that Creator might be for you. It may not be who mine is. Go through the door. God shows up as a door, and all you have to do is walk through it. Simple.